Will the Raiders head coaching search come to a close this week, or could we be in for the long haul and wait till after the Super Bowl? That plus more comes up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 27th, 2026.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. You know, we're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that this show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of your consistent support, Raider Nation, and because of the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day. We appreciate him. We shout him out just as much as we appreciate you and shout you out, Raider Nation. But you can find Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. As you can imagine, a lot of calls, a lot of texts, a lot of stuff about Fernando Mendoza, a lot of conversation about the head coaching search. Those are the top two subjects right now when it comes to the Raiders. Where do they go in the draft? Do they get their quarterback at number one? And who's going to be the head coach to coach that guy up, right? Those are the two conversations that we're having a ton of. So a lot of calls, a lot of texts on those subjects. We'll do that in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about who the updated candidates could potentially be for the Raiders. Could they get this bad boy wrapped up this week? Or is there a scenario where we're all waiting till February 9th after the Super Bowl gets wrapped up for the Raiders to name their head coach? And what kind of, I don't want to say danger, but how risky could that be for the silver and black? We'll talk about that in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, we'll just give you everything that you need to know when it comes to the Raiders head coaching search. We'll go ahead and jump right into that. Going into Monday, I felt pretty confident now that the championship game was over. We'd start to get a resolution. We start to hear about second interviews. We'll hear about the Raiders starting to narrow down their search. We heard about Joe Brady and Brian Daboll. Both at one point were with the Buffalo Bills. Daboll, obviously the former coach of the Giants, was the offensive coordinator there in Buffalo. Joe Brady is the current offensive coordinator there in Buffalo. They were in town over the weekend. They were both in town again on Monday. The one name that we didn't hear about on Monday was Clint Kubiak. He was the guy that the Raiders have already interviewed once, so I thought that there was a good chance that they would have a second interview with him and try to get something squared away. He's my number one candidate for the Raiders head coaching search. I just think that what he's been able to do, not only just in the playoffs, but all season long, as far as, you know, being a very sharp offensive mind, I felt like he was probably candidate number one. And I understand that there's something about his personality, something that could question about his leadership when it comes to leading men that might not jive really well. So that could be a hang up, but felt like he was the leader in the clubhouse. But as of Monday, didn't hear anything about him. Now, again, the Seattle Seahawks are playing in the Super Bowl, so maybe there's a scenario where the conversation isn't there yet. Maybe he's, focused in on the Super Bowl and the Raiders have some kind of conversation piece where they know that they'll pick it back up with him a little bit later on. But as far as the Raiders and what they're doing right now, as of Monday, Alexa Belcastro from News 3LV here in Vegas, she tweeted out the Raiders coaching search is narrowing. Brian Daboll and Davis Webb are all interviewing today, with Clint Kubiak's name still in the mix. Sources also say Raiders minority owner Mike Meldman flew into Vegas today, momentum towards a decision on soon. Now, remember, this is a tweet from Monday. She said, sources also say Brian Daboll is flying into Vegas today for an in-person interview. Add Joe Brady to the list of coaches interviewed today in Las Vegas. The Raiders are now looking closely at Brady, Daboll, Davis Webb, and Clint Kubiak as the decision gets closer. Again, that's the only time I heard on Monday Clint Kubiak's name was really from the tweet from Alexa that he was still in the mix. I don't know how much he's in the mix and how much he's in the mix right now. It really feels like it's coming down to Brady, Daboll, Davis Webb. That's who it feels like it's coming down to. Could there be a dark horse there? Maybe, but it feels like that it's really coming down to those guys. And we'll talk about them and what they could bring to the table. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2. One guy that I went into Monday thinking was going to be potentially the third man, kind of if plan A and plan B didn't work, was Mike McDaniel, who was slated to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. Well, early on Monday, as a matter of fact, the Chargers decided and Mike McDaniel decided that they were going to make it official and he was going to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. A tweet came out from Shefty. Chargers have officially hired from former Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel as their new OC per source. It took nearly a week, but a deal is finalized and the team will introduce McDaniel in the coming days. So now he's out of the mix. So then where does that leave the Raiders if it comes to a fallback plan? If they don't get Kubiak or they don't get Davis Webb, and not necessarily in that order. Again, we'll talk about some of the guys, Dayball, Brady, Webb. We'll talk about those guys in segment number 2, talk about who they can bring with them as far as offensive coordinators and a little bit of experience. Outside of Dayball, there is no head coaching experience that I just mentioned. So there's still 4 teams that need head coaches: the Bills, Browns, Cardinals, and obviously the Raiders. The Bills have the upper hand when they have the quarterback in position in Josh Allen, the reigning MVP of the National Football League. And outside of that, it's just the Browns, kind of a usual suspect, even though Stefanski was there for a while. The Cardinals, we know that there's a lot of questions there. And the Raiders, they still have a lot to prove to the candidates, right? The candidates have a lot to prove to the Raiders, but the Raiders have a lot they have to prove to the candidates as well, as they've had so many rotating doors at that head coaching position. A lot of guys that are getting their first opportunity, like a Kubiak, like a Joe Brady, like a Davis Webb, might want to think about it long and hard before they make the decision to make the move to be the Raiders head coach, because you might not get another chance. We've seen that so many times. Guys get that head coaching opportunity. It doesn't work out. It fails miserably the first time, and you don't see them back in the mix for quite a while or ever. So I'm sure that that's part of the conversation that they're having during these interview process. Like I said, the candidate has to sell themselves to the Raiders. The Raiders have to sell themselves to the candidates. So who are some of the candidates? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2, today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple of the great sponsors we have here on the show, and the first one is Gametime. There's nothing like being in the NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast. Without the hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You pull up the Gametime app, you pick an upcoming NBA game, and tickets will be locked in within minutes. You'll love the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and being able to see the view from your seat before you buy will make the decision even that much easier. Zone deals. You choose a section, Gametime picks the seats, you save money. That's all that matters at the end of the day, right? Great last-minute options, NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. So right now, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create the account, use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Gametime.co. I also want to tell you about FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. So check this out. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. You're a new customer. Just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to deep dive into the head coaching search. We know that there's 4 jobs still remaining: the Bills, Browns, Cardinals, and Raiders. Here's Adam Schefter. He was a guest on the Pat McAfee show on Monday, and he was talking about these positions being filled. Pat was asking him about the Super Bowl and the head coaching openings. Like, what is the most attractive to him at this stage of the game? What's the biggest storyline as the season draws near, with Super Bowl 60 being right around the corner? Here's what Adam Schefter had to say about that and the remaining 4 head coach openings.
Pat, we got 1 game and 4 head coach openings. So there's more of an emphasis on the 4 head coach openings right now than the 1 game that's 13 days away. And obviously it's the biggest game of the year, and there'll be plenty of time to that. But I would think that we would have all these head coaching jobs filled this week, probably sooner rather than later. I wouldn't be surprised if by Wednesday there are no openings left at this point in time.
Okay, so that's all 4 jobs. Is there one domino piece that kind of sets it all off, or all of these acting individually?
No, I think the candidates on the Raiders and the Bills' radar are pretty similar. We have essentially the Bills feel like they're going to go offense. They feel like they're going to go offense. And it feels like Davis Webb, Brian Daboll, Joe Brady, Grant Udinski. That's what it feels like to me. in Buffalo right now. The Raiders, it looks like it could be Davis Webb, Joe Brady's there today, Brian Daboll, like the same names in both places. Now, I would think that obviously Josh Allen's going to be more of a drawing card than the Raiders situation. But if you love Fernando Mendoza, then go take the Raiders job and spend the next decade with him. Like, that's certainly viable.
There's Shefty again on the Pat McAfee show on Monday on ESPN. And the Bills and the Raiders picking from the same guys. And he says all 4 jobs he feels like are going to be filled by Wednesday, which caught my attention in a major way. What else caught my attention is something that I talked about in segment number 1, where Clint Kubiak's name was not involved there. It was Davis Webb, Joe Brady, Brian Daboll. No mention of Kubiak, right? And so, again, that caught my attention. And then Davis Webb came into Vegas on Monday, had his second interview. Brian Daboll had a second interview. Joe Brady had a second interview. So I'm starting to put the pieces together and think maybe Davis Webb, who the Denver Broncos has been eliminated, he's a passing game coordinator, maybe all of a sudden he's in position to be the head coach. He was the second guy I had in line anyway, behind Clint Kubiak. So I feel like it's starting to become a little bit more clear that Davis Webb is going to most likely get that job. At least that's what my gut was feeling. But then again, he had the second interview and there was no offer made. So, are they deciding? Is he deciding? Are they thinking about it? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on in that scenario? Because again, without Clint Kubiak's name being mentioned at all, and Shefty saying that he feels like all 4 positions are going to be filled by Wednesday, that means that nobody on the Seahawks or the Patriots, no coach on any of those teams could actually get a job. And I feel like Kubiak should get that job. But maybe, as I know Seahawks are trying to put a full court press to keep him in town, maybe he's leaning towards staying in Seattle for at least 1 more year. So you start to look at it. And if this, again, goes the way I feel like it goes, and Clint Kubiak is the number 1 choice and Davis Webb is number 2, I feel like you get a combination of Davis Webb as the head coach, Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator, maybe Cliff Kingsbury, one of those 2 guys. Those guys are very close with Tom Brady, so I could see them, wanting to roll with TB12 and trusting that, they're going to have this staff put together the right way. It also would help Brian Daboll if he ended up being the OC, even Kingsbury. If they want to be eventual head coaches, I could see them, leaving for a head coaching job if, in fact, they're able to coach up Fernando Mendoza and get the offense looking really good. And then at the same time, you still have Davis Webb there as your head coach. But Brian Daboll or Cliff Kingsbury being able to be that veteran experience that's already been there, done that as far as a head coach, I can see those guys being in the mix. Also, Jim Leonard's another guy that maybe Davis Webb could lure him out of Denver to be his defensive coordinator. And I feel like that would be a really good start to the staff. One of the things that has been brought up is how deep is Davis Webb's Rolodex, right? Does he have enough contacts? Does he have enough, connections and networks that he can fill out a complete staff? That's something that my guy John Train in the ATL brought up on my radio show on Monday. That's something that Ari Mayrob from the 33team.com brought up on my radio show on Monday. That would be one of the challenges for a guy like Davis Webb, who's still so young in the game at 30 years old, that maybe he doesn't have all those different contacts, but that's where a Daboll and a Kingsbury could probably come in and help as well. Now, could it be a Brian Daboll? Could he just end up being in line to be the head coach, right? Is the search not going as well as I thought the search would be going for the Raiders? I mean, I look at it as a good job because of everything that comes with it. The number 1 overall pick, $100 million in salary cap space, plenty of draft capital, right? And a team that's trying to prove that they're going to be patient enough to allow you to grow this thing. But then they haven't done that either. So, is it as appealing of a job as I thought it was? Potentially. We don't know 100%. We know that there's only 4 jobs left, and at one point there was 10. So that kind of tells you all that you need to know at this stage of the game, that, other situations have been picked before the Raiders. But it just feels like, to me, again, this is just my gut feeling, I've been saying it for a while, that this job is going to get filled sooner rather than later. And like I said, when you hear Shefty saying that the Bills and the Raiders are somewhat picking from the same guys, the only thing that difference maker from Buffalo and the Raiders is the fact that the Bills have Josh Allen, right? But their front office and their GM, those are guys that you're going to have to impress. I know that their ownership said that it's not Super Bowl or bust, but we know it is. Right, they just fired a guy, Sean McDermott, who coached there 9 years, got the Bills to the playoffs 8 times, won the division 5 times, and they fired him for making it to the divisional round of the playoffs, not getting past the divisional round of the playoffs. So clearly it's Super Bowl or bust in Buffalo. So does a Clint Kubiak, does a Davis Webb, does a guy like that, or even a Joe Brady, who's there as their offensive coordinator right now, do they want that job as their first job ever with that kind of pressure? Got to make it to the Super Bowl. Where the Raiders, the expectations aren't going to be Super Bowl right away, but also the ownership has shown unwillingness to be patient, right? Again, that's something that, as much as, I hate to say it, and I know Raider Nation hates to hear it, it's something that the Raiders have to prove, right? So I feel like the Davis Webb collabo, I feel like, he can do some good things with, a Brian Daboll working together. And Cliff Kingsbury is a guy that, he actually played for at Texas Tech. So it'd be kind of funny to see Webb as the head coach and Cliff Kingsbury as the OC, but that very well, in fact, could be what it is. Here's a quick, minute or so of Davis Webb talking about Bo Nix, talking about feeding quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, too early with too much information, and the fact that he knew he wanted to be a head coach pretty early on in his career.
Yeah, I think the one mistake coaches make in this league, which is hilarious, is they handcuff quarterbacks and they try to drill them and mechanically make them something that they couldn't do, or they just got taught and they memorize it and they think that's the only way. So he's had a lot of coaches in his lifetime, and I can relate to that. It's 6 offensive coordinators in 3 years. So him and I have had a lot of conversations in regards of, hey, this is what you've known, this is what I think you're best at, and let's try to have some meaningful conversation here, as opposed to this is rigid, this is loose. Like, let's just communicate, and whatever your best is, that's what we want. I mean, I think everybody wants to do too much early on. Sean talks about it all the time. If you're a young coach, you want to give too much information, but that kind of goes against what I believe in, and that's reacting and giving guys the opportunity to show what they have. So I think just limiting information, making it simple, and allowing them to react and grow their library as they go. Growing up, I wanted to be a coach. I didn't think I'd be good enough to play, to be honest with you. Then I got better and kept playing. So I've always kept everything. I'm a hoarder. My girlfriend hates me for that, whatever. But, I really enjoy information. I really enjoy keeping information that I know I'll use down the road or in meetings today. So I keep everything. I put it in a PDF. COVID really helped me there. The first month and a half, there's nothing to do, and I just scanned every document I had and made it in one file, and now it's able to kind of go back and forth.
Little soundbite right there that's been floating around social media, just to give you a little bit of not a background, but just kind of let you hear a little bit of the thoughts from Davis Webb. Like I said, it feels like to me that he's probably the leader in the clubhouse, but the fact that he's had that second interview and didn't get an offer just yet kind of, I don't want to say concerns me, but lets me know that they're not quite where they need to be, whether it's his side or the Raiders or both. Right. And maybe they're just waiting and holding out for Clint Kubiak. If we end up on Friday and they don't have a head coach, then I would have to say that all roads point to Clint Kubiak being the guy. But the fact of the matter is, if you wait till after the Super Bowl, can Clint Kubiak put together a really good staff, or are all the guys going to be already snatched up by these other head coaching vacancies that have been filled and other coaches are putting their staff together? Like, that's the risk you run. Are you able to get the staff that you want in place if you wait till after the Super Bowl and make Clint Kubiak the last hire out of all 10? That's, the kind of the yin and the yang, right? That's the good thing about getting your guy, waiting and getting your guy because he's proven what he can do. But at the same time, is he going to be able to get his guys, knowing that so many different jobs needed to be filled? So that's all part of it. I don't know. To me, I think Joe Brady is kind of like the new Mike McDaniel. He's the third guy in line for this job. It really feels like, it could be, the Webb Daboll combo, Webb, maybe Daboll as the head coach, and then Joe Brady, somewhere along those lines. But something's got to give. We got to find out something. Some dominoes got to fall, and I think they will sooner rather than later. Always try to get to show up as early as possible. So sometimes I don't know your listening habits, but at some point in the day, you might be listening to this and some decisions might already be made. But because I try to get this thing to you as soon as possible, sometimes that's how it plays out. So you might listen and be like, oh, Q, this has already happened. Well, yeah, but the show's been up since midnight because, again, I don't know your listening habits. I don't know when you're going to work, when you want to work, or when you want to listen to the show, but I try to get it up there as early as possible. So again, the next few days should be very telling. I would say the next 48 hours should be very telling of what direction the Raiders are going to go in their head coaching search. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts will close out the show. 707-654-4693. We'll hear from you next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the show, and that is PrizePicks. The big game, it's almost here. There's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePicks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the big game, which is coming up on February 8th. PrizePicks is incredibly easy to get started. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. Make watching games more engaging, especially during the big game. Great way to keep playing fantasy football even after the season-long leagues are finished. Favorite features, early payouts, right? It'll let you cash out if a player gets hot at the start, so you don't have to wait through the whole thing. And the new social feed makes it feel fun to follow friends, share lineups, and get inspiration from other players. Right now, download the PrizePicks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineup after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Again, we'd like to thank you so much for making this the first listen of the day. Let's start out with a call from AB from Inglewood. Inglewood, always up to no good. He's calling to chime in on the conversation of Mendoza at number 1 and if the Raiders are in position to take him. Here's AB from Inglewood.
Hey, what up, Q? It's AB out of Inglewood. Just wanted to chime in on this whole, drafting Fernando Mendoza at number 1 situation. All these so-called analysts and streamers and YouTubers and fans, consistently saying that maybe the Raiders should think about passing up Mendoza at number 1 or just trading back because they feel like the Raiders aren't a great situation for Mendoza. I mean, that is so tiring to just hear. Like, what team, unless you have additional picks from recent trades, what team picking in the top 3 realistically is going to be good? What team is going to have a great situation for an incoming rookie quarterback? Like, that just makes no sense. And honestly, yeah, we've seen in the past where, rookie quarterbacks get drafted into maybe a bad situation where the team, sets the quarterback up for failure and doesn't prepare them enough with surrounding talent or a good coach. But how is it fair to say that the Raiders are not a good destination for Mendoza? We're 3 months away from the draft. Before that, we have the first wave of free agency. Raiders are top 3 in free agency cap space both this year and next year. Okay, they're in contention to land a top offensive mind, whether it's Clint Kubiak or Davis Webb. They're intriguing options. They're very good options, actually. And if you pair that with a young quarterback who has a smart mind, by the way, he's humble, he makes good decisions both on and off the field, that's exactly the type of quarterback you want in Vegas. So for these analysts to say that the Raiders aren't necessarily a good landing spot and that he wouldn't be a good fit in Vegas, he's the perfect fit in Vegas, especially after what happened after the Henry Ruggs incident and so on. I just don't get how these so-called analysts have jobs, Q. I really don't. And some of these fans wanting the Raiders to trade back for additional picks, this is nothing guarantees us having a top pick next year or the year after. You take your quarterback, you have the number 1 pick, Mendoza's the perfect guy. Go get Mendoza. He's going to prove everybody wrong. Thanks, Q.
AB, thanks so much for the call, my man. Appreciate you, and I agree with you 100%. Teams picking up the top of the draft, they're normally not good, right? But they do have some good qualities. The Raiders do, that is. All the cap space, all the draft capital, a new head coach coming in, compared with Mendoza. Makes sense to me. It's a good situation. But as we know, the Raiders haven't filled their head coaching job yet. So that's a very important hire. They've got to get it right and be able to have that guy to make Mendoza, help develop him, have the patience to grow with him, right? Put him in a good position, put the right people in place around him, the offensive line, weapons. You have to do right by the prospects. If you're going to not do right by him, if you're going to just draft him and then not address the offensive line like they failed to do this past year, then you're going to be in some trouble. So that's definitely something that they need to do. And again, I think this is something they can do well before April, before they ever draft Fernando Mendoza. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Peter P. You got multiple Peters on the show today. This one's from Peter P. P said, what's up, kid? What's up, Ari? After watching this AFC Championship game, seems like Webb isn't ready to be the head coach of the Raiders. Stiddy didn't play well after the first quarter of the game, so I think Webb needs more experience. He's only 30 years old. Also, Denver should keep Vance Joseph. He didn't coach well enough in this game. Doesn't look like a Raider to me anyway. Raiders should focus on McDaniel, LaFleur, or Clint as head coach. Speaking of McDaniel, do you think the Raiders gave up too early on Josh McDaniels? And why didn't he and Dave Ziegler select Christian Gonzalez in the draft? Seems like Josh McDaniels is now benefiting having him on the same team as him. Thanks, and go Raiders. That's from Peter P. That came in on Sunday. And, well, first of all, Mike McDaniel now, he's off the radar. He's now in L.A. with the Chargers officially as the OC, so he doesn't matter. I'm not judging Davis Webb by what happened in the AFC Championship game with Jarrett Stidham as a quarterback. Look, he's a backup quarterback for a reason, and he looked like a backup quarterback. He made backup quarterback decisions and bad decisions, right? The turnovers that he had really single-handedly allowed the Patriots to win that game. Denver was outplaying the Patriots early in the game, and they couldn't maintain it. I thought that Christian Gonzalez would have been a good pick. I was at that draft, got a chance to interview Gonzo before he got selected. The Raiders obviously went with Tyree Wilson, which, it was a guy that was on the radar at that point as well, a guy that we talked about quite a bit. He hasn't lived up to the hype, but then Christian Gonzalez has been injured a lot as well. So I don't know if that's the case. I don't think that Vance Joseph is a guy who's leaving Denver. Based off what some of his players were saying on Monday, it sounded like he was going to be sticking around as well. I would love to see Clint Kubiak be the guy just because of what he's been able to do as an offensive mind, what you saw from the scheme, the way that he had, JSN lining up in the backfield and finding a way to scheme him open. And that's Jackson Smith and Jigba, the wide receiver for Seattle, who had a fantastic year. I just think that his creativity would really help out with the Raiders. I don't know if he's leaving Seattle. I don't know if he's interested in Buffalo. I don't know if he's interested in the Raiders or not. But he was my first choice, followed by Webb. Followed by McDaniel. McDaniel's out of the mix now, so I think Joe Brady's involved in that, and Brian Daboll as well. So we'll see what happens moving forward. I think Josh McDaniels is a really good OC. I don't think he's a very good head coach. I really don't. So that's just some guys are better like that, and that's okay. It's not a bad job to have either, and he's obviously done well in New England, hasn't done well anywhere else. But thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Eduardo in the 714. That's Santa Ana, California. He's calling to talk about Fernando Mendoza and the conversation we had on Monday about the Raiders not being ready. Here's Eduardo in the 714.
Hey, what's up, Q? It's Eduardo from 714 Santa Ana, California. Calling out, first-time caller. Want to first and foremost say a shout-out to you and Ari for all you guys do for the nation. Daily listen of the day. First listen of the day, actually. I was just giving my 2 cents on this whole Raiders not ready to draft a franchise quarterback, and I think that's bogus, man. I think sooner or later you need to draft a franchise quarterback, and the Raiders, who knows when they might be in this position again to draft first overall. And a prospect like Fernando Mendoza is just one that impresses you the more you watch, from his tape to the way he is, his character, There's a lot of different prospects that play good ball, and I don't know, it's just, especially in Vegas, you got to have a kid whose mind is right and, focus on being a better player, a great human being, and I think Mendoza is a top choice for that. And, well, I just think we got to build around him, build a solid O-line, get some weapons. You look at the Patriots, they have Drake May, who's the future. Why can't the Raiders have Fernando Mendoza, who's the future? Let me know what you think, man, and looking forward to this offseason, free agency, the draft, aside from hopefully picking Mendoza first overall. I'm curious to see what the Raiders do with the remaining rounds. Hopefully we get key pieces throughout the different rounds and fill in many positions that we need. And, yeah, man, hope all is well. Shout out to Ari and you once again, and go Raiders.
Eduardo, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, man, I do think them not being ready is bogus, like you said. You have to get your guy at some point. Go get him, right? He has a chance to grow with the team, continue to improve, and be the guy the Raiders need. They have to do right by him. I mentioned it multiple times. I don't see why they can't. They have all the assets that they need to be able to build up the offensive line, put some more weapons in place, right? Get the coach, get the sharp offensive mind, have the guy that's going to help develop them. And, oh, by the way, you have a quarterback that has a work ethic that I believe is going to try to make sure he gets as good as possible, right? He's going to be that guy that's going to continue to to hone in on his craft and build what he does. I don't think Fernando Mendoza is anywhere close to a finished product, and I think he understands that, and he's going to continue to grind and get better. That's what excites me about Mendoza. I think he has a chance to be a really good quarterback. The Raiders just have to do their part to surround him with the right, proper pieces. So thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. I mentioned multiple Peters on the show. This is a text from Peter in Winnipeg. Hey, Q. Peter from Winnipeg. Hope all is well, my man. I got a couple of questions for you today. I saw an article today, and then they mentioned that David Montgomery could be an option for the Raiders. Personally, I'd love this. If the cost is a late-round pick, why not to try to build bully offense that can dominate the line of scrimmage? Obviously, the team would need to invest in the offensive line, but I think that'll be taken care of. A backfield of Genty and Montgomery would be a lot of fun. Second thing, why does it seem that Adam Schefter doesn't really accurately report on the Raiders? Last year, he said the team did not try to make a move for Jaden Daniels. Meanwhile, they did. Now he refuses to say Clint Kubiak is a coaching candidate for the team. Does he have some sort of dislike for the team that I don't know about? Anyways, thanks for all the great work that you and Ari do. Keep it up and go Raiders. That's Peter in Winnipeg. Couple things with Shefty. I mean, he did used to work in Denver. Maybe there's a little something there. I just think that when he didn't mention Clint Kubiak and the Raiders, maybe he knows something that we don't know. That's why it caught my attention, though, just like it clearly caught your attention as well. David Montgomery, you teaming him up with Ashton Genty, like similar to what the Detroit Lions did with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. That would be a nice 1-2 punch, right? Like they have Sonic and Knuckles in Detroit. It'd be cool to see Genty and Montgomery. I don't know how much they would be able to get the most out of Genty if that's something that they'd want to invest. I don't know what it costs to get David Montgomery, but it's definitely worth a thought. And I don't think you can have enough playmakers around. And Montgomery's a hell of a running back going all the way back to Iowa State. Really good running back. I would have no problem with him being a guy that, obviously he's not getting the bulk of the carries. That would still be Ashton Genty, but I think that he would be really good. That'd be a nice 1-2 punch for sure. Like I said, I don't know what it would cost, though, to go ahead and get him. So thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from Julian from Moraga. He's calling to talk about drafting the quarterback and why you don't need to overthink it. Here's Julian from Moraga.
You, what's up? Julian from Moraga. Listen to your show for the past couple of years. First listen of the day. Love all the content. I want to double down on what you're saying in terms of drafting your quarterback. If he is indeed the guy, you got to draft him. This is the number one spot. We don't have to trade. We don't have to move up. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to guess. You can prepare to draft him and then build around him. I love that concept. $100 million in cap space. But more than that, when we were good, that's what we did. We picked up O-line free agents, and I'd love to see us go after Tyler Linderbaum, center for the Ravens, young, played a lot of football, and then just continue to build that O-line around him with free agents and or draft capital. But I love your take in terms of if he's there, get your guy. Don't overthink it. Thanks for all that you do. Go Raiders.
Julian, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you, my man. Shout out to Moraga. Went to basketball camp back there in the day. St. Mary's. It was so far back in the day, you'll appreciate this. I was wearing the Magic Johnson gold and purple Converse weapons. Remember the weapons? Those heavy shoes? And they were heavy. There was a practice that I was in that we did the practice and we went back to our dorm rooms and they gave us a little bit of time off and then we had to be back at practice. And I was like, man, I'm not taking my shoes off. These things take too long to put back on. That's how heavy they were, but I loved them. They were the talk of basketball camp. Remember Larry Bird had the all black Converse. So there was the weapons of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And yeah, I had those. That's how far back in the day I went with that basketball camp at St. Mary's School. But with that being said, the assets that you have at your disposal, that's the big separator for me. Feels like a lot of people are acting like the only way you can address areas of concern is the draft and that you only have one pick. When that's not that's not reality. Like first of all, in the draft, they have 10 picks. They have $100 million in salary cap space. Like there's so much that you can do. And that's why I talked about the Patriots on Monday's show. Like they went and addressed so much this past offseason before the season ever started by going out and getting a lot of free agents offensively and defensively to build that team up. Right? Put together an offensive line to give Drake May a chance. Got the right head coach after Gerard Mayo got fired after being one and done. Brought in Mike Vrabel, brought in Josh McDaniels, and all of a sudden here they are in the Super Bowl. Not saying that that's the same path for the Raiders, but you can do more than one thing in the offseason. You don't just have to get the quarterback and say, okay, we're done. We have nothing else. No, you have draft capital. You have salary cap space. You can do multiple things in the offseason. That's okay. That's not a bad thing, but it's so funny how many people think that that's like the only thing that you can do. So, yeah, I think the assets are there. The Raiders just have to make the right decisions and bring in the right people. They'll spend a lot of money in free agency. That's for sure. That was kind of short, so we'll get one more quick text in. This is from the 515, no name on it. It says, yo, Q, Never done this before. Ha! Coming all the way from Iowa, I got to say, never understood the knock on Mendoza and his stats. People look at Burrow and Tua in college versus Mendoza saying that they are better prospects. Well, look how that turned out. Burrow hit, Tua didn't. College stats don't mean anything after draft night. And I think Bowers and Genty and maybe another rookie wide receiver could have Mendoza off to a fast start. That's a text from the 515. Yeah, I think Mendoza, his numbers aren't fantastic. His leadership is. His throws that he makes on Sunday throws are great, right? His athleticism is better than most people expect and give him credit for. And he's got it between the ears. And I think all those qualities are great qualities for him to have as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And oh, by the way, he doesn't have to start right away. Right? Just because you draft him doesn't mean he has to start day one. I think a lot of Raider Nation would love to see him start day one, but doesn't mean he has to. And Tom Brady's been on the record of saying he's not a big fan of rookie quarterbacks starting day one. So I could see a world where Aiden O'Connell, he gets to start for maybe the first 3-4 games, and then when they feel like Mendoza's ready, then they pass it on to him. But, until he's ready, they're not going to be forced to put him out there on the field. Thanks so much for the text. Hope to hear from you again, and make sure you give us your name next time you text in. So that's going to do it for today's show. We'll see how this thing goes when it comes to the coaching search. Will we get some more information today? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversation going on today. And, maybe by the time you're hearing this, maybe we already know who the next head coach of the Silver and Black will be. But there's one thing for sure. We'll be back here tomorrow talking about it. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.